decision points on the airport, which is the environmental impact report. And they're going to be submitting a few specific options to study the environmental impact of those options if that was chosen. And after the EIR is submitted and comes back, it becomes very difficult for the city council to decide to go in a completely different direction from what was studied. So that's why it's important that whatever this club decides we want to see and we want to advocate for, that be one of the things included in that EIR. So therefore, our project right now is focused around the timeline of that EIR and what we want to see included in there. But we're going to be flexible as this develops, and maybe there will be an opportunity to advocate at a different time, in which case we can reconstitute the committee and continue to do that studying. So we want people of all backgrounds to join this committee, whether you've been immersed in the airport issue for decades, or if this tonight is going to be your first time learning about the airport issue. Your perspective on all those different things is going to be valued and useful for the club's discussion. So if you want to sign up for the committee already and you haven't, just please reach out to the club, email us. There's a specific link. I've asked Patricia to put it into the Zoom chat, but if you're here in person, you'll get the emails from the club. You can just respond to that email and say you want to be on there. And also there's going to be a link in the email that goes out tomorrow morning that has this the same as the last email. There's going to be a link. You fill out the form on Google Form and you'll be on the committee. And then we're going to send out a doodle poll. That'll be the first important decision of the committee is when we're going to meet, and we'll have that meeting, and the people who are there attending the meetings are going to be the ones who actually get to vote on the committee. So we want you to join. I don't care what your predisposition is on the park. We want your input in this discussion. That's how we're going to we're trying to activate more people in the club, and that you don't have to be on our board to be active. And this is one way that we're going to create more opportunities. Thanks, Cindy. You do need to be a member in good standing to join. If you're not, you can speak to Mike Soloff, who can help you there. Okay, so if you're not interested in joining the committee, but you just want to learn more about the airport, that's also welcome too. So tonight, we're going to start by hearing from a few different perspectives from community groups that are already actively organizing around the airport. Then the committee will meet. Then on May 28th, we're actually going to have a special presentation from city staff about the three visions that Sasaki, the developer of the park, is going to present. And then as of now, our plan is to meet again sometime after that to figure out our recommendation to the full membership. Then the full membership will finally get to vote. And that will be the position of the club. So even if you attend none of this, you can come back to the June meeting and you can still have your opinion heard at that point. So let's get started with our first presenting group, Airport to Park. This is the coalition that has led on the closure of the airport and has been active on this topic for many years. Speaking on their behalf is Frank Gruber. It'll be up here, and it'll probably be up here too. So, Nate, if you can pull up the first slideshow.
Let's move this. If I put this on here, is that a problem?
That's okay. Yeah.
Okay.
This is pointing at you. You're good.
Okay. So good evening, Santa Monica Democrats. First thing I want to say is thanks to the club for having this process. I think it's great. I don't think anybody is going into this kind of depth into the issue as the club is doing, as just described by John. So as he said, I'm speaking here tonight on behalf of the Santa Monica Airport to Park Foundation. I'll talk about the organization in a minute, but by way of personal introduction, I've been involved in Santa Monica politics for over 30 years, going back to 1994 when I was treasurer of the campaign to approve the original Civic Center plan. After that, I was on the Housing Commission and then the Planning Commission until a slow-growth city council in the 90s did not reappoint me because I was considered too much in favor of housing development. I ran as a pro-housing candidate for city council in 2012 and 2014, and I lost both times. I say this because inasmuch as I've been in favor of building more housing for 30-plus years, you might think it is ironic that I'm not here tonight speaking in favor of housing at the airport, but rather in favor of a great park. But it is not ironic. It is not ironic because more housing development, which is happening in Santa Monica, means even more need for parks. Specifically, a great park that is healthful, sustainable, and accessible to all. The airport land is our last and only possibility for providing future generations critical parkland for our growing population. Let's begin with some history of the site. In the 1920s, oh, wait a minute, we never got the, okay. All right, well, we're now getting into the meat of it. Okay, it's that little thing there, if we can make that bigger, there it is. Okay, that's how we start, but we'll go to, okay. So let's begin with a little history. In the 1920s, there were many proposals for parks to support population growth in the LA region, but few were realized. One that was realized was a park at what is now the airport. It happened because Santa Monica voters passed a parks bond to acquire the land in 1926. So next slide, please. Okay, well, that's a bond over there. Okay. This original great park in the 20s and 30s included tennis courts, playing fields and playgrounds, archery, skeet shooting, lawn bowling, a golf course, and many other recreational and sports amenities. Interestingly, a 900-acre county park was proposed to be adjacent, but that never happened. Next slide, please. Okay, the green dot there, the green square, that's the Santa Monica Park. And the black area, that was the proposed county park that never happened. And there were parks proposed all over LA County at that time. None of them happened, or very few of them happened. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so here's a close-up of the Santa Monica Park. At the time, amateur aviation was treated as a park use with a grass landing strip called Clover Field. That's the area in brown over on the left. Donald Douglas had a workshop there, which is on the lower left to the side there. But with World War II looming, the federal government took control of the land for the use of Douglas aircraft. The park was closed and one of the world's biggest factories was constructed. Next slide, please. They used machines like this to create the runway. After the war, Douglas continued to operate its plant until the 60s when the company moved to Long Beach. The business park on Ocean Park Boulevard replaced the factory. The airport continued to operate as a general aviation airport. Starting around 1980, the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, required the airport to service jets, and the airport ultimately became a major home and host for private jets. Next slide, please. People protested the jets as shown in this photo, and that's Ted Lieu down there, kind of a young Ted Lieu, and Marty Rubin is to his left, and a bunch of other people there. They're protesting the jets. But they protested, but this was a classic case of what is so common in America. A public resource, the land the city purchased with the 1926 Parks Bond, being co-opted for private use, often for the benefit of business and the wealthy. I won't go into all the details, but for nearly half a century, the city has been trying to close the airport, which involved epic battles with the FAA. Under an agreement in 1984, the city had the right to close the airport in 2015, but the FAA reneged. Starting around 15 years ago, the city began a new round of litigation to secure its rights and reclaim the land. The aviation industry responded by gathering signatures to put a measure on the 2014 ballot to take away the city's right to close the airport. Our organization, Airport to Park, arose from the group of volunteers who formed to oppose the aviation industry's ballot measure. Next slide, please. There we are. We started by trying to persuade people not to sign the petitions. Next slide, please. What you see there in the middle was a sign that we would take to grocery store parking lots to try to persuade people not to sign. Since we couldn't interrupt them, we wanted to try to get the conversation going. Well, we slowed down the signature gathering effort, but ultimately aviation spent enough money to get the signatures they needed. Once the aviation industry had collected the signatures, members of the City Council, which cannot run campaigns for or against ballot measures, came to our group to organize the campaign against aviation's ballot measure, which appeared on the ballot as Measure D. We formed the official campaign committee against it. Aviation's campaign for its measure was largely based on fear of development. They claimed that if the airport closed, it would be replaced with something like Century City or Playa Vista. In response, the City Council unanimously voted to put a countermeasure on the ballot. The measure, called Measure LC for local control, provided that if the airport closes, the only development that can occur there without approval by a public vote are parks, public open spaces, and recreation. Next slide, please. And so there you see the yes on LC and the no on D. Both D and LC were on the 2014 ballot. It was a hard-fought election. Aviation spent over $1 million. Our committee was able to raise about $135,000 from almost 500 individual donors. Most important, we were able to organize a wall-to-wall coalition of community and political organizations, including the Dem Club. We had many volunteers and waged a grassroots campaign. In the end, LC passed in a landslide with 60%, and D was crushed with only 40%. Three years later, the city settled its litigation with the FAA with the landmark 2017 settlement agreement, which allows the city to close the airport January 1st, 2029. Shortly after that, the City Council voted to close the airport on that date. However, we at Airport to Park do not believe the battle to return the airport land to the public is necessarily over. We have operated under the assumption that aviation will try once again with a new ballot measure to perpetuate the airport. Since 2017, we at Airport to Park have seen our role as keeping the promise of the Great Park alive during the 12 years leading up to closure, so as to be vigilant against aviation's next move. The promise of the Great Park is one that is well worth keeping alive. We together have the opportunity to create a great park that will serve generations to come. Urban parks, the lungs of the city, are essential for both social and environmental reasons. They are also good economically, attracting businesses, facilitating housing, and increasing municipal revenues. There is no argument. Parks are essential for so many reasons, including their contributions to physical and mental health, environmental well-being, improved biodiversity, climate crisis mitigation, reclaiming stormwater, reducing heat island effects, improved social interaction, and economic growth. Next slide, please. Because Santa Monica lost its great park, the city is woefully underparked, as the next slide shows. Next slide. Okay, what you see here, this is a chart that shows the ratio of parkland to population in 21 California cities. You see Santa Monica at the bottom, with only 1.4 acres per park per 1,000 residents. The ratio, by the way, is even worse in the adjacent neighborhoods of LA, which is often less than 1 acre per 1,000. Planners consider 3 acres per 1,000 to be the bare minimum. And I don't know if you can read the cities, but they go down Fremont, Santa Cruz, Sacramento, everything, we're down at the bottom. So the next slide, please. The next slide compares the percentages of parks to the overall size of cities. Once again, Santa Monica is at the bottom, with parks covering only 2.5% of the city's area. You have Irvine, San Francisco has 20% of its area as parks. We're at 2.5%. LA is somewhere in there. Dense urban population and parks have a symbiotic relationship. The most dense cities in North America, including New York, Chicago, Boston, San Francisco, Philadelphia, Toronto, and Vancouver, all have greater park acres per 1,000 residents and a greater percentage of park space per city area than Santa Monica does. While Santa Monica and the region suffer from a lack of housing, particularly for the rising millennial and Z generations who are busy forming households, as well as for workers in employment centers like Santa Monica, these figures show that we also suffer from a critical lack of parks. Anyone who has had a kid in sports, or anyone who plays adult sports, or anyone who likes to take a walk in nature knows this. The public certainly knows this. Participation in the current park conversion project process has been extraordinarily high and highly supportive of a great park. Next slide, please. There have been thousands of comments, mostly in favor of the park. The 800 people who showed up at a workshop in December numbered more than anyone could remember for a planning event in Santa Monica. Next slide, please. These are both from the December event. The new Great Park at the airport will be a spectacular public resource with views running from the Pacific to downtown Los Angeles. There will be room for recreation, culture, and nature, a legacy for future generations. We respect the motivations of those proposing housing at the airport site. Santa Monica needs more housing, but Santa Monica is now getting more housing. State laws now facilitate housing development, and in response to state requirements, much of Santa Monica has been upzoned for more residential development. As the Dem Club knows, because the Dem Club helped elect them, Santa Monica now has its first strongly pro-housing city council. This council has now already restarted efforts to develop, primarily with affordable housing, city-owned properties like Bergamont Station and 4th and Arizona, which are located close to transit and other urban services. Private developers are building more housing, and other property owners, including the owners of the business park adjacent to the airport, have indicated that they want to build housing too. These privately financed housing developments by law will include affordable housing. After decades of no growth in population, Santa Monica's population has been increasing the past 20 years, and it will continue to increase. More people will mean the need for more parks, especially for people who don't live in single-family homes with backyards. They will need more playing fields and other recreational facilities, more barbecues and picnic tables, more walking paths, more community gardens and farms, more cultural facilities, more environmental resilience. There are many places in Santa Monica to build housing, as shown in the 2010 land use element of the general plan, which called for infill housing along transit corridors and downtown and in former industrial areas, and as provided in the zoning update since the last housing element. In contrast, most of the airport land is not suitable for housing. Little of it is near transit, and most of it, having never been developed, lacks infrastructure like streets, water, and sewer lines, and utilities. The cost of developing that infrastructure would need to be added to the already high cost of building housing. Building housing on undeveloped or isolated land at the airport will not have the social, financial, or environmental benefits of infill development. Next slide, please. Meanwhile, the wide open land at the airport, perfect and necessary for a great park, could never be assembled again. It is a unique resource for a park, and once built on, it would never become available again for public use. Cut down in size, it will be impossible for a park there to serve both social and environmental needs. For all these reasons, A2P believes that the city should proceed with plans to reclaim airport land as a great park. By the way, the flowers that you see here, the wildflowers you see in this photo, are on land at the airport that the city liberated when, under the 2017 agreement, it was allowed to reduce the length of the runway by 1,500 feet. You're not allowed to walk on that property now, but you can see it. Lastly, there is one additional angle to consider, namely the threat of a new ballot measure from the aviation industry to keep the airport operating as an airport. That threat would be intensified if there is any attempt to amend Measure LC before airport closure in 2029. If aviation hires signature gatherers like they did in 2014 to bring a measure to the ballot and then get the measure on the ballot, in their campaign to perpetuate the airport, they will use fear and capitalize on any confusion or discouragement the public perceives about the park. A ballot measure to amend LC would give them ammunition. Aviation will say that Measure LC's promise of parkland was a bait and switch. Santa Monica voters have been supportive of housing over the decades, but no pro-housing ballot measure has ever faced $1 million spent against it. That's what aviation spent in 2014. We defeated them then, but that's because we had a united front. That's not likely for an amendment of LC, particularly if it comes before the public has seen a good plan for a park and before airport closure. It was a great victory to limit Measure D to 40% of the vote, but consider, With a base of 40% who voted to keep the airport, aviation only needs another 10% to win. They can get it if the public is confused or discouraged about the park. If aviation won a ballot initiative, that would mean that our public land would remain privatized. Even the money the city makes from leasing offices at the airport would remain in the airport fund and not be available for other purposes. To repeat, a ballot measure to amend LC before closure would only encourage aviation to bring forward a countermeasure to perpetuate the airport. This is a risk we should not take, and it is presumably why Gleam Davis, in December 2023, at the meeting where City Council began the airport conversion process, stated that any ballot measure to amend LC should take place after closure. A ballot measure before closure would also throw a wrench into the conversion process, delaying it. We all know that delay is one of those things that discourages the public about government. In conclusion, the airport land provides us with a chance to leave a legacy for generations to come. A legacy like those that have been passed down to us. A legacy of optimism, of public and civic generosity, and inclusion that is part of who we as Santa Monicans are. A great park at the airport will be perfectly consistent with how Santa Monica manages and hosts the beach, the pier, and the promenade for residents, for the region, and for the world. Let's liberate the public land at the airport, not reprivatize it. The airport land is essential for housing, but not as housing. That's a message that is both small d democratic and capital D democratic. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Frank. And next up, we have a proposal called Cloverfield Commons, presented by Vivian Rothstein, and as well as Santa Monica Forward co-chair Bradley Ewing. Let them know. Nate, we'll want the other slideshow on now. Okay.
So good evening. I'm really happy to be here. And kudos to the Democratic Club for putting the Democratic into Democratic Club, because this organization really allows for grassroots decision-making, grassroots engagement. Those of you who are leaders in this organization devote enormous amount of time. But without organizations, we really can't make change. We're just a bunch of individuals with opinions. So it is a very precious thing, and I'm honored to be here. And kudos to the Airport to Park people for getting the airport closed. I voted for LC. I wasn't really voting for a park. I was voting to close the airport, as I think most Santa Monicans were. So I wanted to tell you just a little bit about myself. And how I got involved in this issue about the park redevelopment. My daughter wrote a book with her dad called Just Action, and it was a follow-up to a book called The Color of Law about the history of residential segregation in our country, and how segregation was not really a choice that Americans made not to live near each other. It was made through federal and state laws and city laws. And it was also made by lending institutions, private ones and federal ones. And the book Just Action is about how cities can take action and are taking action to desegregate their communities. And as a proud mother, I went to hear my daughter give one of her speeches, and she talked about land trusts. And I didn't really know about land trusts before. But I realized that here in Santa Monica, we have a nearly 200-acre land trust, which is land that is owned by the people of Santa Monica. Now, other cities and counties work for years to pull together parcels for a land trust so that they can build affordable housing, and housing that serves what's called the missing middle, the working people who can't afford market rate housing. And we had a land trust here, And I realized how embarrassed I would be if we did not consider using a portion of that land for housing. And this was about 2 years ago. And I talked to my friend Joan Ling, who had been the director of Community Corporation for 20 years, now retired. And we decided to put together a group of people, local residents, to figure out what we would really like to do with the land. What was the just thing to do with the land? What was responding not to the 1920s, but to the present and to this profound housing crisis that is actually all over our country, but is very deep and persistent in Los Angeles County. So about 14 of us, people who really didn't know each other before, but representing different ages, different housing situations, different neighborhoods, we met every month for a year and a half, and we hammered out what we thought should be done with the land. And we did research, we talked about our values, and we came up with a proposal that's called Cloverfield Commons, and it proposes using half of the available land for below market rate housing and the other half of the available land for a park, for a great park. We feel that these are very compatible uses, and I want to say a few things about the park issue. I know that the argument is always made that we are park poor, but in fact, those figures don't count the 3.5 miles of beachfront and the 245 acres of sand that are at the Santa Monica beaches, not to speak of the grassy areas and all the recreation activities that are available at the beach. And I know I'm a resident who goes to the beach often, and probably most of you are too. It is part of our open space. It is part of our community space. So I don't feel like we're as desperate for open space as it's portrayed. Also, I'm a over 40-year resident of Sunset Park, and in the 80s, I worked for the city manager's office when the Progressive Coalition first took over the city, and I actually participated in the community input process for the development of Clover Park. And I know that there is a pressing demand for sports fields from a lot of organized sports groups, and there was a lot of demand for Clover Park. And I think organized sports are important. But if you look at Clover Park, it's the passive uses that are really busy and the big sports fields that are empty most of the week, because I walk there frequently. I'm not against sports fields, but I am for housing. And if you think about our parks, we're not park poor. The poor are in our parks because they don't have any place to live. And we can't just go forward as if this is not a crisis that is going to it's going to be with us until we address it as a society and as a culture and as a city. So we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to utilize the land that belongs to us for the benefits of the future of our city. So I wanted to say, living in Sunset Park, things have really changed over the years since I've lived there. On my block down the street, it used to be the fire chief who lived there. Around the corner was a librarian for Will Rogers School. Across my alley was somebody who worked at City Yards. It is no longer possible for people doing those jobs to live in Santa Monica. Very few are able to live in Santa Monica. And in my neighborhood, millionaires are buying up the properties and building huge homes. And of course, that's their right in a private property economy. But we're talking about land that could be used with a different vision. So given what's happened with prices, this is one thing our group looked into. There are 81,000 people who have reportable jobs, that are reported to the state that work in Santa Monica now, 81,000. And of those, only 7,000 live here. So we have over 70,000 people on our streets. And if you live in Sunset Park, all of our throughways are freeways now starting at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It took me an hour and a half the other day to get to Culver City because of the traffic. And it's not just congestion for us, it's what it does to the people who work here, to their family lives. I've talked to nurses who commute 2 hours each way. They can't have dinner with their kids. It's really affected their personal lives, and the schools, the hospitals, even the hotels have a hard time hiring people because people can't live anywhere near the city. So part of our proposal, we have a proposal to use half of the land for housing, below market rate housing, starting with low income, very low, low, moderate, and up to 150% of the area AMI, which for a family of four would be $106,000 a year. So we're envisioning a community that's a mixed economic community without the very upper crust people who can afford a lot of these new apartments, which are extremely expensive, or the single family homes. But a mixed economic community that is what drew me and many of us to Santa Monica. We also feel it can address the historic discrimination against African Americans who were displaced by the building of the 10 freeway and the original owners of the land, the Tongva. There could be opportunities for people to have preferences in these units because of past wrongs that were committed against them and their communities. So we feel there's a lot of opportunity. It would make the park safer to have human eyes on the park, to have people around the park, and plenty of room for fields. And anyway, that is our vision. And the last thing I want to say is there is really no money for a park, but housing comes with money. There would be, because the land would be owned by the city, there would be a steady stream of funding to fund the park forever in the future, because there would be money paid to the city for use of the land. It would be moderate amounts, but it would be money. And there are various ways to fund housing. There's state funding for low-income housing and developments that are environmentally sensitive and have opportunities for transit that is not a car. There's also the possibility that industries in Santa Monica, like the local hospital industries and the hotel industries, and just as the school district is talking about it, that they could fund they could fund some housing units for their employees. And this is something that used to be done back in the 40s when employers funded workforce housing. There's also the possibility of bonds. I mean, we feel like housing and what housing represents in terms of building community provides opportunities to bring resources and make the park possible. So I'm going to stop, and Brad, who was a member of our visioning committee, is going to talk about the state, the climate in terms of state requirements in Santa Monica. Thank you.
Sure. So I'll do a quick intro. This is my first time speaking in front of the Santa Monica Democratic Club, so thank you all for having me. As John said earlier, I'm the I'm the co-chair of Santa Monica Forward. I'm not speaking on behalf of that organization today, but it's an organization that we stand for housing and mobility and equity within the city of Santa Monica. I personally was radicalized by my commute from Santa Clarita to Santa Monica every day. So I lost about 3 days of my life every day to the commute on the 405. And a lot of time in the car kind of gets you thinking, why is it like this? Why, when I look at the price of rent in Santa Monica, so if I could live close to my work, I'd be paying more than my parents do for a 4-bedroom single-family home in the suburbs, right? And, when I started really digging into the policy, what really became evident to me was we have a severe shortage of housing in most communities throughout the state of California, and this really is a problem nationally, but I think it's most acute here in Santa Monica, or within California. And it's something that I take really personally, and I see the impact on my friends and on my family. I come from a very large family. I have 12 cousins of my generation, 8 of which are from California. All of those cousins have been forced to leave California due to the cost of living, and it's really unfortunate. My cousin Alex, he's transgender, having to leave a state like California where he's afforded significant protections for who he is really devastating. Fortunately, he and his wife were able to find living arrangements in Washington State, a place that is pretty good and protective. But some of my other family members aren't so lucky. I've had several cousins who have had to go to Austin. Austin's a great city, don't get me wrong, but the state of Texas does not afford the same protections to you and I that the state of California or the state of Washington does, right? And so for all of those reasons, I think it's really important that we do look at this as an opportunity to build a great park, but also to build community there as well, to make space for some who have been displaced from Santa Monica or who can't afford to live here. So I have a short presentation titled RHNA 2029. I don't know if we can get that up there. Cool. I see it on this, but I don't see it on the big screen. Cool. So I'm going to get kind of into the technical policy weeds a little bit. I won't try to linger on this too long, but so RHNA, what we kind of in the housing activist biz call RHNA for short. So Santa Monica's future housing mandate, the housing must go somewhere. So next slide, please. So what is RHNA? What is RHNA? So the Regional Housing Needs Assessment is mandated by state housing law as part of this periodic process of updating local housing elements of city general plans. And so that quantifies the amount of housing that each city or municipality needs to build during those 8-year planning periods. So we're currently in what's called the 6th cycle. So the Southern California Association of Governments, aka SCAG, adopted its 6th cycle allocation plan in 2021, which covered October 2021 to October 2029. So our region, and that covers a lot of Southern California, was mandated to plan and to build over 1.3 million new homes, which was distributed across almost 200 cities, and just under 9,000 were assigned to Santa Monica. And starting within the 6th cycle, the 5 earlier cycles were kind of a bit of a joke. It was sort of just a checking the box exercise that was handed down by the state. But a lot of reforms that were passed at the end of the last decade really gave teeth to these, to the housing element process and really kind of put penalties. So, for example, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Santa Monica and several other cities within Santa Monica being subject to something called the builder's remedy. That's sort of the stick that was coming down from the state of California, where if you don't kind of follow these laws, then you sort of get that power taken away from you. And the sort of philosophy that the state is taking is that this sort of 50-plus year experiment of local control without local responsibility doesn't work. So we have to change the incentives. We have to address the severe housing shortage that we find ourselves under. And so some of those changes include a more quantified and objective way of measuring what housing need is within cities and within regional areas. So it's reflected in low vacancy rates, high overcrowding rates, super commuters coming from outside the region. That last one was not really in play within the 6th cycle, but it will be in the 7th, and that's important because, as I can personally attest to, there's a lot of super commuters coming into Santa Monica, and a lot of former colleagues of mine. I have people coming in from Palmdale, from Redlands, from Irvine. These are people, powering our city. When I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes 5 years ago, the nurses who were attending to me in the middle of the night were all literally, 4 of them were sharing a room on the west side in Westwood, so they could actually afford to be near their jobs and not have to commute, a hellish commute every day. And so the 7th cycle is coming. The city will likely start planning for it in 2028 and into 2029. And then the policy changes that the city will have to do will likely occur in 2030, 2031. Next slide, please. So how are we doing? The unfortunate answer is we're not doing quite well. So Santa Monica, in order to fulfill its needs, we need to build about 1,110 units a year. We are building a fraction of that. So I don't know if you can all see this. I apologize for cramming all of these visuals into one slide. Maybe a little bit too information dense. But there's been a lot of significant headwinds. And so some of those, unfortunately, are outside of our control. We can't control what Jerome Powell does with interest rates. We can't really control what the lunatic in the White House does with tariffs, and that explodes the price of lumber, for example. But some of the headwinds are self-inflicted, and I think Frank did talk about this a little bit, where I think I am bullish a little bit on the future that will correct for some of the mistakes that we've made, but we have lost a lot of time. So the previous council, which this Democratic Club worked so hard to defeat and put in real progressive champions, pro-housing champions, really kind of sandbagged the housing plans that we put in place for the 6th cycle. So we really limited the amount of land that was zoned for affordable housing. The initial plan was rejected by the state. That's why we were subject to the builder's remedy. And so what this all means is this puts us on track for a comparable or even larger requirement in 2029. So within the 2029, Santa Monica is looking at probably in the ballpark of it, again, probably another 9,000, 10,000 units that we have to plan for. And if we don't plan for and facilitate the construction of those units, then we will be subject to further penalties. So next slide, please. So one way that we can address this, one way to meet our future needs, is by building community at Cloverfield Commons. And I think, as Frank so eloquently said, density and parks go well together. They're two great flavors that go well together. The unfortunate reality today, though, is if you look at the land around the area of where we want to build our great park, is it's currently zoned for the least dense, most exclusionary type of housing. And this isn't a dig on, if you're living in Sunset Park or if you're living in these, you're not bad for living in these types of homes, but it is the most exclusive access. So I looked at Zillow when I was on my way over here. On the LA side of the airport, it's a median price of over $3 million to buy a home. On the Sunset Park side, it's a little bit better, but it's still over $2 million. So the cost of entry to be within walking distance of this park is a $400,000 down payment and a 5-figure mortgage payment to the bank. That's not equitable. We don't think that's sustainable. We think there's a huge opportunity here to meet our affordable housing needs, to build real community, and to preserve and expand the diversity of Santa Monica. Other cities have done this to great success. Miller, I know it's typed as Muller, but that's how the guy who lived in Austin in the early 1900s liked to be called. In Austin, used to be an airport that was converted into Parks Plus housing, and the same thing with the Central Park in Denver. So it's been done before. We know it can work, and we know it can build great, thriving communities. And that's all I've got, and I'll hand it back to Ms. Vivian Rothstein. Or I thought you had you didn't have another slideshow? Oh, my apologies. I thought there was more slides.
All right, thank you, Vivian and Brad. And finally, this evening, we'll be joined by Santa Monica Sustainability Commissioner David Pettit. He is the senior attorney at the Center for Biological Diversity and the former senior attorney at Natural Resources Defense Council. And he joins us to look at these land use decisions through a sustainability lens.
That's okay. I'm too tall for these things. Thank you for having me tonight. The last time I was up here with a mic.
It'll be fine if you just put it on here. Point it here. You'll be good. You'll be good.
All right.
Yeah, if you want to go handheld, we have a...
No problem. Last time I was up here with a mic, I sang a song for my wife, Lynn Nalaboff's birthday, and you'll be happy to know I'm not going to put you through that tonight. Thank you. I am, as Joe said, I'm a member of the Santa Monica Sustainability Commission. I'm an environmental lawyer. I've been one for a long time. We do a lot of work suing the Trump administration, suing oil companies and the like. And yeah, well, you have to. We have to be doing that. And I've done a lot of CEQA litigation, and I want to talk to you about some of that tonight. Frank mentioned this a bit. CEQA is an acronym for the California Environmental Quality Act. And whatever decision the city council finally makes in terms of how to go forward, they're going to have to do an analysis under CEQA and do an environmental impact report. CEQA is often litigated, often by me, but not in this case, but often litigated, and there's lots of ways to make mistakes that opponents can jump on to delay projects. So, I mean, I've talked to city staff about this a few times, that they need to be extra careful in how they do the CEQA analysis here, because I can guarantee you 100% someone's going to sue. Somebody's not going to like whatever the city council does. They're going to sue under CEQA, and then it's going to get resolved in court. And, whatever you all may think of arguments pro or con, we're not making the call. Some, man or woman wearing the robe who's a friend of the governor sitting in court, they're going to be making the call. And that's something that people need to take into account, not just how we look at it, but how a court might look at it not too far down the road. In terms of context, I guess I should probably say I'm not speaking officially for the Sustainability Commission tonight. I'm just talking from me. In terms of context, I think Frank mentioned this a little, but there was a lawsuit between the city and the FAA that dragged on for a long time. The FAA was saying, no, you have to use this as an airport forever. The city said, no, how about next week? And then, to my astonishment, the parties got together and settled the case. And the settlement got signed off by the federal judge. And that's what gives the city council the right, but not the requirement, to close the airport starting in 2029. And under LC, proper LC, as you know, there are certain uses that the city council can effectuate without a vote, and other uses need a vote. So that's kind of where we are. The three choices that the city council is considering, in my opinion, as a SEQA litigator, they'd be nuts not to put all of those, not to study all of those in the environmental document they're going to have to do. One of the things you're supposed to do under CEQA is consider all the reasonable alternatives to the project that you want. And if they don't study housing, someone's going to say, well, you should have done this. All these people showed up and said you should do it, and they didn't do it. So, Judge, they should have done it. And that could be a winning argument. So it seems to me almost a no-brainer that in whatever the council decides to do eventually, they ought to do a full analysis of what housing would bring, what the environmental effects would be on housing. And in that connection, I do want to talk a little about the idea of cumulative impacts. And it's funny, when Vivian was talking, I'm Vivian's neighbor. I used to play guitar with the fire chief. He was a jazz drummer in his youth. But yeah, our neighborhood has totally changed since we moved in there like 42 years ago or something. And what we're seeing now is more and more of these big projects going up. There's the Gelson's project, Gelson's parking lot, 550 units, something like that. The project on Pico, near us, it's 100 units. And, whatever Builder's Remedy and other things get built between now and 2029. And if you add 3,000 units in the park to that, that's really doubling the population of Sunset Park in a very short period of time. And the city, in doing the CIR, needs to look at all of those impacts sort of mushed together and analyze that, not just the one project, but the whole mess of new housing, the whole group of new housing projects, and ask, well, what's going to happen? What's going to happen to air pollution and noise? Traffic itself is not a CEQA impact, but air pollution as a result of traffic is. What's going to happen to circulation in the city? Is there going to be enough water? Is there going to be enough police, enough fire, enough schools? Where are these kids going to go to school who are going to live in the new units? They need to look at all of that stuff. And if they don't, I think they're putting themselves in a vulnerable position when and if somebody attacks the project later on. And, I just think in terms of advocacy, I think, Vivian, from your standpoint and your group's standpoint, my view is that you guys ought to address that stuff and not count on the city to do it for you. Because if the city staff or the city hires a consultant and comes out a way that you don't like, you're kind of stuck with that. And the way CEQA litigation works is the court looks at, the city makes a choice, and the court looks at whether there is substantial evidence in the record to support it. The court isn't going to dive in and weigh the evidence and pick which expert is right. The court's going to look and say, yeah, there's some evidence here, looks good to me, you're out. That's kind of how it happens in practice. So if you are thinking that, well, if the city says something we don't like, we'll put in our experts and then our experts are better than their experts, that may be how it works in this room. That's not how it works in court. You need to make sure that as best you can that the city is going to come out, their consultants are going to come out your way. Otherwise, you're setting yourself up to lose a CEQA case. So my message on that is don't wait for the city to do it for you. All this cumulative impact stuff and the traffic and all this stuff, I think that if people who want housing need to deal with that reality, that's going to be looked at. And you need to do it yourself first. That's my view, anyhow. There's one other thing I want to address, and it's kind of a wild card, and it's the Surplus Lands Act. It's this weird state statute that has to do with when, in this case, a city decides to get rid of property that it owns. I think there was an assumption in the last couple of talks that this, if there's housing built, the city would own it and run it. I'm not sure that's true. I mean, look at what Community Corporation did that Joe Ling ran for years. The city didn't, they own lots of affordable housing units in the city, but they own it. It's a nonprofit, they own it. The city doesn't own that land. The city doesn't run the units. So it may be that the city doesn't want to be a landlord for 3,000 new units, and they might want some nonprofit to come in and run it. But if they do that, if the city either sells city land or leases it for 15 years or more, that triggers a state statute called the Surplus Lands Act. What that is very complicated, but what it basically does is sets up a bidding process where the city says, well, we're going to get rid of some land. Who'd like it? And then people bid on it. No, really. And then people bid on it, and then there's this whole bidding war thing. I mean, the city can limit that to affordable housing. There's lots of affordable housing providers out there who might want to do this. And the city doesn't really control who has the best bid. And then if somebody comes in from the outside, bids for the property, and gets it, because of the density bonuses in state law that we're seeing play out in the Gelson's project and in the project on Pico, the housing could be designed by the new owner in a way that the city doesn't like or has new control over. And I've seen the renderings, the maps that you folks have made. They look pretty cool, but that's not necessarily what a new owner would want to do. And there's no guarantee that if the city decides to sell the land, that the kind of project that you guys are thinking about is what's going to get built. And so that's really a critical decision point, I think, that people need to get straight with the city and city staff. You guys going to own it? You guys going to sell it to somebody else? You guys going to lease it? Or what? Because that can have very serious consequences down the line on what actually gets built there and who runs it. Who's going to be dealing with the everyday landlord-tenant issues, and who's going to decide who lives there and who doesn't live there and the like, and what it's going to look like. What's the massing going to be? How many stories? All of that stuff could be out of the city's hands. So I think that's another consideration that people need to pay attention to. I mean, it's kind of technical lawyer-like stuff, but that's kind of what I do for a living. And I guess my bottom line is that things aren't as easy as housing's a moral right, let's build it. There's a lot of legal stuff that the city needs to be very careful about in making its decision and in deciding what it's going to analyze under the state environmental laws. I mean, that there's no requirement. If the city analyzes 3 options under CEQA, there's no requirement that the city has to choose the environmentally best one. They just have to look at them. They have to analyze them. They can pick any one they want. But if they don't analyze one that's a reasonable alternative, they're going to lose in court, and we're going to have to do this all over again. So with that depressing note, thank you for your time this evening. It's complicated, but here we are.
Thanks, David. That was really insightful. I think everyone would agree, really good feedback for everybody. Okay, so we have a few minutes. I guess if there's 1 or 2 questions that anybody wanted to ask of the presenters before we break for the night. Yeah, Craig. And then just the presenters, just listen. If you want to respond, you can. Craig?
Both ends.
A what?
Housing as well as farm. Yeah. Or if not, how big of a house thing, and then how big of a park?
You want to go first?
Yeah, that's actually our proposal, is that half be a great park and half be housing. So right now there's 192 acres that would be available for development. So they would have to be designed to be integrated into each, so that it works. But so it's both a great park and housing. That's our proposal.
As a follow-up to that, how much would be considered affordable?
Well, that's something we want all of it to be below market rate, but not all very low income, but a mix of very low, moderate, and up to 150% of the area median income for a family of 4. So it would be an economic mix. It wouldn't be all, all one or another, but a mix, like a normal community without the very wealthy, which is a normal community. But it's what, Santa Monica has always been, this mix. But it's really a vision that we're trying to promote, to get us thinking together about how do we build a community there, and what kind of community do we want to build, and who is in need of the housing, and who we want to serve. Yeah.
Frank, do you want to weigh in too?
Well, it's obviously to answer your question, Craig, sure. I mean, there's theoretically, you could do anything you want there in a theoretical point of view. I think we have to deal with the realities and the law. I guess what I would really like to say here is that we should wait a little bit and see what the city staff and Sasaki come up with in this next round, because the city council gave them direction to come up with 3 templates, one of which would be absolutely compliant with Measure LC, which would mean not only no housing, but a whole lot of other little things that couldn't go there, like a big amphitheater or all sorts of stuff, or a restaurant. They wanted a second one, which might be LC compliant if there were changes made to zoning laws that would bring certain things under the definition of park. And then they had a third one, which they explicitly said would not be LC compliant and would be designed so that land at the airport would be used to help finance the park. And as part of that, staff at Sasaki would look at housing. And if any of you have done this current Survey 3A that is going through, there's a whole section in there on housing possibilities. So, yeah, to answer your question, yes, there could be housing there. Whether it's a good idea or not, as you heard us say, we think that this land, every square foot of the open land. Now, keep in mind that not all the land at the airport is open. There is already developed land there. And some of us thought that LC allowed for the conversions of buildings into other uses. Apparently, the city attorney says that that doesn't work, but we'll leave that aside. But we think that, as Vivian just said, what she has is a vision. One thing I would absolutely say is that I don't think a vision about housing is going to be passed by the city of Santa Monica voters. And there won't be anything more than a vision until we get through this process. And as David pointed out, and John, I want to contradict something I think you said before, sure, which is that this EIR sets a decision that is, irrevocable. No, the EIRs have alternatives. So this question does not get answered at the end of this year. The question goes on.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm going to give probably some advice that my own people would say, don't bother giving it. And my old friends in the housing movement probably don't want to hear it from me. But they're very unlikely to pass something if it's a vague pro-housing amendment to LC. They theoretically might, and I'm not saying I'd vote for it or not, but they could conceivably, given Santa Monica's propensity to vote for housing, if they came up with something very detailed like the Civic Center plan in 1994, it might pass. But our group thinks that there are lots of places to put housing in Santa Monica, that the cost of building 3,000 units is probably more than $2 billion. I mean, think of what a housing unit, affordable housing unit costs even without lumber going up, $600,000, $700,000. It's a $2 billion process. That money doesn't exist. I mean, money does exist for a park. There's plenty of money around for park development. This is one of the richest communities in the world, as Vivian was just pointing out what people are paying for houses here. It's a very wealthy community, and the most expensive part of the park has already been paid for 99 years ago. The $2 billion worth of land. So I just think we need to wait a little bit to answer some of these detailed questions. We should see what this excellent staff, consultants have brought in, and see what they come up with. But there's a lot of things the City Council has said to play with. I hope that answers.
I just wanted to clarify one thing, that in our proposal, we feel that the land should be owned by the city in perpetuity. And so the housing units could be affordable in perpetuity, not to be sold off, that it is a housing trust for the people and the people who live and work in Santa Monica.
Okay, we'll go to Jerry next, and then I got you after that, Ann. Oh, yeah, thanks. Yeah, good point.
First of all, I just want to, again, thank everyone. I agree with Frank that take the time. We need to be unified. I wanted to say something respectfully about Ted Lieu. One of the first guys to support closing the airport and supporting a park. Same with the late Bill Rosendahl, who was also in that picture. May he rest in peace. And same with Karen Bass, that worked with these groups that got this ballot measure passed. And I'm a big supporter of affordable housing and low-income housing. And my gosh, I still think what Frank said. Wait till after the airport closes to do this, and let's all work together to keep these NIMBYs that keep opposing this low-income housing and transit corridors and anywhere in the city. And then we'll have a great park, because we haven't even heard yet tonight from the Great Park Coalition of everything that's proposed environmentally and recreationally and culturally that could go in that not really that big area. And all the other areas around the city in the perimeter where there is opportunity for housing. I'm just afraid, as Frank, absolutely. They'll try anything, and with Donald Trump behind them, they'll do anything to divide us and take a last stand to keep that airport opening. And that'll hurt the environmentalists, that'll hurt the housing people, hurt everyone. So we need to stay unified and make this compliant with what the voters voted for. Thank you.
Okay, Ann, we'll go to you next, and then I'll come around. I got Mitchell, and I got you, and probably we'll be out of time at that point, but did you want to go? Vivian, if you, do you mind, or, okay, as long as someone does.
Thank you so much. Just quick question for Cloverfield Commons. So if the land will remain owned by the city in perpetuity, how will the housing and all the new infrastructure be paid for? Who will pay for it? What's your plan?
Well, do you want to talk?
No, she.
Is this, yeah, okay, this is on. Well, so, what? We have a mic.
Okay, go ahead, you guys. Just talk.
So, variety of ways we could raise money on land. So we could do a ground lease. You know, I'm blanking on the name of the development that was done in Playa, but that was done there. City could do a bond. You know, city could enter a public-private partnership. There's state credits, and God willing, hopefully there'll be federal funding in 2029 and onward. I think we're all hoping for that, regardless of where we stand on if there should be housing or not as part of this great park. And, you know, I think there's lots of other ways that we see that we could raise money. We're trying to do entertainment zone in downtown Santa Monica. I spoke to that at council last night, and I'm very optimistic that that's going to be a way to sort of revitalize our struggling downtown. That'll bring more businesses back in. That'll bring more, you know, tax revenue back in, more sales taxes. Hopefully, the more housing coming into places like downtown Santa Monica, more property taxes. And so, I think there's lots of ways that we can get creative to bring in the funding. And as Vivian said earlier, I think there are lots of funding streams that are available to us. And I think something that we didn't talk about up there, but something that we've discussed within our group at Cloverfield Commons is trying to have, you know, discourage car use for people who do live at the housing that's on that land, right? You know, partially out of traffic concerns, partially out of environmental concerns. But there's also funding streams that are available for that. From the mobility side of things, where we could get more funding streams that way as well. And then, is there anything else you want to add?
Yeah, just that I had mentioned that employers that can't attract and hire employees in the health industries, which is a growing industry here. Here, the school district has talked about building housing, and the hotel industry also is a very big employer. So there's the possibilities of other resources. And frankly, there's no resources for a park that I know of. Well, I'm not aware of them.
Yeah, of course. Let's get Mitchell. Can you give his mic back? And then.
Well, one of the main things that Airport to Park, one of our major achievements, actually, probably we know about it, is that we got the city council, when they started this conversion process, to put in the documents that hire the consultant, that whatever plan they came up with out of this process would be financeable and buildable. There would not be a pie in the sky type, Tonga Park plus whatever, $7 million an acre. But with the understanding that parks are built over time. And in this next go-round, we understand they will start talking about financing. They have a financing consultants. And so we should just wait and see what they talk about. But one thing I will say is nobody thought that we could build the Annenberg Beach Center, and it's called the Annenberg Beach or whatever it's called. It has the name Annenberg on it. Nobody thought that the Broad Stage could get an endowment. Broads came in. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities for philanthropy. There's, just as the housing, you talk about bonds, there could be a Parks bond. Parks bond's probably very popular in Santa Monica. So there's Proposition 4 money for doing the water stuff. There's a lot of possibilities for money, but I can't tell you right now how we're financing the park. Oh, yes. Oh, but the one thing we do know is the city right now makes $20 million a year gross from leasing offices at the airport. That money's going to go up because they've spent airport money to rehab 3200 Airport and some other buildings there. So that money is going to come online. It's not net 20 million, but it's a lot of money, and that can be used for maintenance and or revenue bonds. So there's a lot of possibilities. But anyway, I'm not telling you we have it financed. I'm just telling you that this park will not die because of lack of money.
Okay, so now we're going to go here, and then Mitchell, you'll be next. But it's an order. They're doing an order.
All right, so first of all, I just want to thank everybody who's been sharing some really great ideas. And I empathize with all of the sides of this conversation. I mean, housing is a crisis, there's no doubt about it, and a lot has to be done at a local level. There's the other issue is the fact that here we are the day after Earth Day, and one of the things that we realize is that the life systems of our planet are being completely consumed. And the pain of realizing what our next generations are inheriting, it's really heartbreaking, because I'm a documentary filmmaker, and I've been talking with people all around the board in terms of like what's happening to climate change, what's happening at the level of the Amazon forests and all of the forests all around the world. And one of the things that is very, very clear is that the old adage of think globally and act locally is the only thing that we can do. And one of the reasons why I think Santa Monica is such an extraordinary city, and one of the reasons why I actually moved out here, is because there's a tremendous commitment and understanding about sustainability and about the need to make sure that our life systems, at least at our local level, are protected. And Santa Monica, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, granted, I'm kind of spoiled because I was born and raised in Rio de Janeiro. So we are kind of like surrounded by a rainforest. But still, having lived in a lot of different cities, I have to say, I hate to say it, but Santa Monica feels pretty gray to me. And when you look at the beach, yeah, the beach is absolutely extraordinary, but it does not have the greenery and the chaparral and the ecosystem and the species, the keystone species, and all of the herbs. And I mean, the Tongva people can tell us all about it. There's a tremendous amount of ecosystem that's been trumped by concrete in our city. And it does not have to be our future, because we've been given 200 acres of land where we can start regenerating our city. In addition to doing what people say, tree people, the organizations say, when you plant trees, it's like putting, what is it called, needles. Just like when you do acupuncture on a body, it's putting needles that are healing throughout the city. Imagine doing this at the park. It would be extraordinary. So what I like to say is that, yes, let's have housing, but let's think about putting concrete over concrete, and not concrete over a beach or concrete over the ocean, or concrete over the vision of an ecological, stunning park that not only can bring our ecosystem back in Santa Monica and help all of the climate change and locally be able to help the ecosystem around our world, but also it brings us back to anchoring ourselves as a species and realizing that we belong to something so much bigger than ourselves. Allowing our children to let go of their digital devices, even if it's for 10 minutes a day, and be able to turn a rock and realize that they're not alone in the universe.
Did you want to ask a, sorry to interrupt, but.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to share something that I think is absolutely critical. So sorry for taking too much time. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, it's Mitchell's up next.
Boy, what a great speech.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, don't forget the birds and the bees that'll come down there, and the animals, the raccoons, you know, and
Okay.
And wait, I'm
Go
talking.
ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
I got okay, and where you can't see from one end to the other, with trees and mounds, you know, and it's good mental health. It'll be hopefully a regional park with state assistance to finance it. As I asked Ted Lieu, but he didn't get around to answering it. Maybe Senator Ben Allen can help out. Now, getting to this issue of housing, it's a plural. How much housing are we talking about? I mean, if you go with housing, it's unlimited, isn't it? And when you have unlimited housing, you know what we've got. We've got density. We got people stepping on each other's heels. Is this what this is the change of the community? With our city council is going for it. They can opt out of it, but they're into it. Because we keep getting these, I need housing, okay. And the excuse for housing is the teachers and the workers. Well, I might suggest, I think that's legitimate, but I think a better suited area that, other than taking over this airport land, is over by the Santa Monica Civic Auditorium, by the county building, that parking lot. They put the train to us. The train is right there. If people want to come to the county building, that's the objective. Get people out of their cars and taking mass transit. It's all around the parking lot area, and that parking lot area can be suited for the housing for the city employees, whatever, you know, anybody that's associated with the city, the workers. This is the ploy for housing, for subsidized housing. Thank you very much.
Did anyone want to respond to it, or now we can just? Yeah. Okay. Well, let's go back. Go ahead, and let's get a microphone over.
I can be loud enough.
Well, we need you to be loud enough for Zoom, and you can't do that without a microphone.
I have a question. You mentioned about SCAG's housing element, and we had 8,000 were meant to build, and you expect there to be more. Is that just expanding that 8,000, or is that an increase on the 8,000 that we were supposed to build?
So whatever we fail to build for this current cycle, which ends in 2029, will roll over, and then there'll be a reevaluation of the housing need of Santa Monica, and so there's several different variables that go into that. And so, what is the vacancy rate of housing? What is the overcrowding rate of housing? What is the amount of super commuters coming into Santa Monica? And I mean, to be frank, I think the allocation that we got for the sixth cycle really was the political compromise position, the floor of what we should build. Because, as I said up there, like I used to be one of those super commuters. I've worked with a lot of people like that. There's over 70,000 people who commute into the city every day, right? That's just how stark the housing jobs imbalance is of the city. So we've got a long way to go in terms of building housing.
So that 9,000 can become 11 or 12,000.
It could be big. If I were to bet, I would bet that it would be bigger than what we got for the sixth cycle. Probably be at least 10,000.
Thank you.
Okay, I didn't see Mike's hand up. I think he probably. I'm going to come to you. I know that Mike is going to respond to this part of the conversation, but I'm going to come to you next, okay?
So the first thing people need to understand is we were not assigned 9,000 housing units. We were assigned something like 2,750 market rate units and 6,600 and something below market rate units. So I think it's important that anybody listening to this understand that it's not any housing that needs to be built. And given in the past two RHNA cycles, we've always made our market rate housing. In fact, we crushed it last time, and hopefully, if Trump doesn't keep interest rates up there crazy and some other things change, we'll actually make it here too. But we're anywhere in the state of California, and including here, are we going to be able to make the below market rate housing. Now, we all face a choice in this city. Some of us, I first lived in Pacific Palisades, which is an economically gated community. I then moved to Brentwood, which is an economically gated community. And then I moved to Santa Monica, which is an economically diverse community. I live north of Montana in a house that was ridiculously expensive when I bought it and is now even more incredibly ridiculously expensive. But 5 blocks from my house, and some people literally north of Montana across the street, is affordable housing in the city. And so I think we all have to ask ourselves, do we want to live in a city that's economically gated, because that's where Santa Monica is going, unless we intervene, because our rent control housing no longer is affordable to anybody in the lower income, even moderate income, and it continues to go up. Now, if we really want to do that, we're going to have to find resources, and one of the resources we're going to have to use is public land. We're doing that right now, and if we want to continue to have a community as we grow and as we lose more and more of our long-term rent control tenants who are lower income and are replaced by higher incomes in an economically non-gated community, we're going to have to devote some of our other public land to that. And I personally think that that can include a portion of the airport. Half would not be what I personally would support, but we should be doing that there. And we're not going to, it's not the equivalent of some other land somewhere else, because the cost of land in Santa Monica is expensive. So I think that's important. I don't know if David Pettit's still here. I mean, if I'm wrong about what the RHNA numbers are, feel free to correct me, but I'm not. And David Pettit, who tells us that we can't make sure that we get the kind of housing we want there, is also, he's going to have to explain to me why at 4th Street, we were able to do an RFP, and at 14th Street, we were able to do an RFP, why we can't do an RFP at the airport. So I think that there's a lot of interesting conversation tonight, but I think everybody needs to understand that there's a lot more detail and information that needs to be delved into to do this, but we do face a fundamental choice about where the future of Santa Monica is going and what kind of community we want to live in.
and people can make that choice. There are people who like to live in Beverly Hills and the Pacific Palisades and Brentwood. I'm just not one of them.
So Ann and Craig, just for the interest of time, I'm going to go to people who haven't asked a question yet, and you're next. So let's get Mike. If you can get the mic from Mike, and then you can start talking.
Sure. Hi, my name is Joe Patel. I'm one of the founders of the Great Park Coalition, and I live in Santa Monica. I'm a public interest attorney. Following up on Dave Pettit said, I share some of the concerns that he had and some of the issues that he presented to the Cloverfield Commons folks, which is with 500 plus units going into the Gelson's parking lot, hundreds of others going up in the communities, they're proposing 3,000 units in a very small portion of the city, which is essentially landlocked away from transportation modes. Anybody who lives in Sunset Park knows that the population is about 7,500. Putting 3,000 new units would more than double the population of Sunset Park. And what concerned me is in the mission statement by Cloverfield Commons, they thought that that was a really good idea. In fact, if you look at the last page of the mission statement, they claim if we put all of the housing at Sunset Park, we don't have to have it in other parts of the city. And so I had asked them whether that is truly an equitable distribution of housing in the city when we know that this city has spent decades trying to establish transportation corridors in the middle of the city so we could have people getting on and off the train so that they could commute and get out of their cars. I would like to ask them, where is the vision now about building housing along transportation corridors, and why do you want to place it in one of the most transportation isolated portions of the city, doubling the population of one community while the rest of the city has absolutely no impact? That's my question.
Well, if you read our proposal, we call for transportation hubs so that there's shared vehicles, so down emphasizing individual vehicle use, bike paths, and also shuttle buses to downtown and to public transportation. I can't believe that you actually think that other parts of Santa Monica are going to want to absorb the affordable units that we are required to build, even the moderate rate. The fight over a project to even build 30 units is just like warfare. People don't want to live with people who don't have the same income level that they have. It's just, if you've ever been involved in one of these efforts to get buy-in, it's almost impossible. So it seems like it's a perfect place to have a mixed, it's not going to be all low income, but a mixed community. And we propose that the buildings be built along the same scale as Sunset Park and historic 1940s designs, not large, huge apartment, units, but modest places like Sunset Park is now. 2-3 bedroom homes, these are single family homes. What we're proposing is rentals or limited equity co-ops. But most people in Santa Monica never even go to the airport. They don't even know what the land, how big that land is. I know my neighbors, and I know, anyway, I think that you're counterposing two things that are not in contradiction. A large 192-acre park that has no people around it at night and in the mornings is not going to be a place I'm going to want to be in. It's not going to be safe unless we have a police force, a park force, which is going to enforce safety in something this large. But if you have people living around it, you have people engaged and watching what's going on, which is one of the reasons that I know Central Park has been raised by some of the park advocates, but Central Park has millions of people living around it, and they know what's going on in Central Park, and that's one of the reasons it's a place that people utilize. So I don't know. I just don't think that humans and parks are contradictory. In fact, they're copacetic.
Well,
yeah.
Okay. I'd like to make a couple comments, partly with my history of being a houser. One of the things I want to point out is that back in 2012, 2014, I would say that the true housing movement for everybody in Santa Monica, housing at every income level, what it consisted of Pam O'Connor, sitting back there, me, and Terry O'Day. There was no housing movement in Santa Monica in 2012, 2014. Otherwise, they might have put up a ballot measure themselves. Let's preserve ownership of the airport so that we can build housing there. Or they might have said vote no on LC as well as vote no on D, and then that would have preserved it. But right now, and then nobody ever talked about Bergamot Station for housing. Nobody ever talked about 4th and Arizona. There was no movement for that. It's come up now, which is great. I love housing. I think this is what I've been working for the whole time. Not just, a lip service about certain kinds of housing so you don't actually get housing built. But to talk to Michael's point, Santa Monica, yeah, we had roughly 2/3 of our arena was, and by the way, we don't have to build the arena. We have to plan for it. We have to allow it. But 2/3 of that. But, the funny thing about it is Santa Monica is very proud that ever since Measure R passed in 1990, something like 35 to 40% of all the housing built in this city has been affordable. It's been a great achievement. It's not like we haven't done that. But the real reason I picked up the microphone again was that this idea about building to the scale of Sunset Park in this day and age in an urban environment is just bad housing policy. If you're talking about putting 3,000 units on 100 acres, something like that, that's about a little bit over 30 units per acre. Downtown Santa Monica is the amount of housing that's called for at 4th and Arizona, the amount of affordable housing, and at Bergamot is either 125 or 150 units per acre. Downtown Santa Monica in urban density, 125, 150. You could put 3,000 units, on 25 acres. Now, I'm not saying to do that at the airport, but you certainly don't have to take up half of the airport to do it. And this idea that what really offends me, the first thing that Vivian has said tonight that offends me about this thing, is the idea that we shouldn't have a park because we're afraid of homeless people or we're afraid of violence. You did say that. You said the park will not be safe unless you more or less said normal people are living next to it.
I think she said that she would be afraid to go there at night if there wasn't housing.
Where people living by.
Yeah.
Well, something, that's exactly the argument that the aviation argument will make. They will say, don't build that park. It's going to be full of homeless people. It's going to be full of muggers. It's all that kind of stuff that is so anti-urban. It's the wrong way to approach parks, and it's the wrong way to approach housing. Sorry.
They said the parks were filled with poor people because there's not housing.
Look, homelessness is the shame of our civilization. There's no question about it. But it's no reason not to build a park.
Okay. So I think we need to get close to wrapping up. Do you want to ask one more question, Jonah?
Yeah, I guess, my name's Jonah Breslau. I'm with Unite Here Local 11. Just briefly, our union, we support Cloverfield Commons. We support that vision. I don't think, just to respond to a question that was posed earlier, I don't think anyone in Cloverfield Commons thinks that we should only build affordable housing at the park. And I think many of us have fought for years to support affordable housing in many other sites in the city. And we believe we need affordable housing there too. I used to live in Santa Monica. Actually, at the time, I canvassed for Mr. Gruber. I shared a bedroom with someone else. There were 6 of us in a 3-bedroom apartment. We were violating our lease. We kept the blinds closed all the time so that the managers didn't evict us. I couldn't afford to stay in Santa Monica. I moved out of Santa Monica. I've moved further and further from Santa Monica over the years. I guess my question to the parks folks is, I think it's beautiful. Of course we support parks, but what would you say to our members who work in Santa Monica, who make Santa Monica's economy thrive, who live next to, in many cases, the most affordable place that's close by is next to a much larger, much more polluting airport near LAX? And what would you say to those folks about why it's so important to use all of this land for housing rather than building affordable housing for working people who make Santa Monica possible, as well as in other locations? What would you say to them? Or what would you say to me? Like, I can't afford to live here anymore, about like why it's so essential that every part of the airport be used for a park rather than allow some amount of affordable housing.
Well, let me just say something. If you look at the, if you look at the FAQ for Great Park Coalition about our housing thing, and I'll be honest here, we talk about there's 160 there's basically 160 acres at the park that can be developed as a park, as at the airport that can be developed as a park. The rest of it is buildings that aren't going to go anywhere, already developed areas or whatever. We're waiting to see what staff comes up with to say about that land, to see what to do about it, to support, maybe that's, to be somehow used to support the financing of the park. But we know that there's acreage there that's not going to be part of the park. But we feel that every square foot that could be park should be park, because the people who live in the affordable housing you're talking about, they need the picnic tables. They need the barbecues. Their kids need the sports fields. Now, if there's 30 acres around there, now most of it, some of it is along Airport Avenue, is not going to be good for housing because it's very isolated unless Santa Monica College built dorms there. That's probably not a bad idea. Now look, I'm not talking for, I just want to make it clear, I'm not talking about for A2P right now. I'm not talking about for the Great Parks Coalition. I'm just speculating because we don't have positions on these issues. So don't attribute to me don't attribute what I'm saying to them. This is just when you look at the map, this is what you see. Airport Avenue is not a good place for your affordable housing. It's not a good place for market rate housing. It could be a good place for dormitories. I don't know, they want to put some dormitories on the Lear campus. College students take up housing in this town. We all know that. A lot of them from out of the country. Then there's maybe some of that area is up next to the business park. The business park wants to build housing. Maybe something can be worked out with them. But to take up 95 acres of this, most of which would need sewers and streets and all that kind of stuff that costs tons of money, and say that that's going to be semi-suburban housing, it doesn't, from a housing point of view, it doesn't make any sense. And that's me speaking as a houser, not me speaking for Airport to Park or the Great Park Coalition.
I would just want to respond to your question. It is a good question.
Frank, you want to?
To respond to your question, and I have kids who are about your age, maybe a little bit younger, and they're going to face the same challenges that you all are facing now. And I would suggest that the issue that you're talking about is the same issue of income inequality that this entire country is facing. It's the same whether you're in parts of Manhattan or other parts of major cities. But with specifically to respect to your question, where would you put the housing? To go back to what David Pettit said, you could put it downtown. You could put it along the transportation corridors. I remember sitting at Brewworks at a Santa Monica Forward function, speaking to a pro-housing person, and we sat there and we looked at the different locations right in front of us, right along the rail line, underutilized plot, underutilized building. You could put a tremendous amount of housing along the locations that this city over many decades conscientiously planned it to be. Build it along Pico Boulevard. You could build it along parts of Ocean Park Boulevard. You can build it south of the 10 freeway on Lincoln. You can build it on Colorado. You can build it on Broadway. All of those were designed as major transportation hubs. That's where the housing was intended to be, so we could get out of our cars and walk. That's where I would suggest. Once that is all filled, come back and let's talk about something else.
Is that the Liberty City element that you're talking about, like the airport, or are we comparing like to like?
Well, Bergamot. Sure. Sure.
Okay, I just want to say one thing.
No, I'd like to respond to his comment.
Okay, okay.
In
Just that if you look at the
their
20.
arena goals through the state of California, we have
Let's get a mic on Vivian.
In order to meet the requirements from the state of California, we have to do both. We have to develop in the areas that you see are along the corridors that are potentially for housing, and we have to do the airport. The numbers are huge, what our responsibility is. And if we don't meet those and we don't plan for that, the state is going to impose it on us. And I think we need to realize we don't have a lot of choice, really. And this is, yeah. Do you want to say something?
I'll add just one more kind of dimension to the RHNA analysis. So one of the reasons why the state of California did not certify Santa Monica initially was because Santa Monica failed to show in its plan that it would affirmatively further fair housing. So part of what RHNA is trying to accomplish is to sort of address the previous injustices that have happened, right? And so if we don't if we don't build housing in areas that have not traditionally, provided or built enough new housing over the last 50, 60, 70 years, then we're not affirmatively furthering our fair housing goals. And that was something that the previous council explicitly did, which was, previous councilmember Glean Davis had a proposal to allow moderate income affordable housing citywide, a citywide housing affordable overlay. And that was voted down, by that previous council. And so those requirements are still going to be, in existence. And so the proposal here is to only build a great park is to build a great park in what is objectively one of the most exclusionary areas of the city. And I don't really think that aligns with my personal value. Like I want the great park, but I don't think we're following our values or affirmatively further for housing if we don't plan for more housing in every neighborhood within the city.
Okay, I appreciate the animated discussion, but it's very late for our meeting, so we're going to wrap it up. But thank you. Well, let's thank the guest speakers. I really appreciate these guys. And I know, speaking for myself, I've learned a lot about this. I really appreciated points made by everybody tonight, and we've got a lot more to discuss about it. So if you're interested in continuing the conversation, it's not the end. We're just getting started. Please sign up. We're going to have the link. It'll be on our website. It'll be on our email blast, social media, to join this airport committee. We'll start meeting on Zoom. We'll talk about it more. Thank you. And the next membership meeting is May 21st. Right here, we'll have Betty Yee and Tony Thurmond, who are both running for governor. Thanks so much. Have a great night. Have a great month.
Hi, everybody. Night, everybody.